Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
So at 12:01 this morning, the President of the United States put into effect the reimposition of sanctions. The Iranian, this is what the President tweeted after the sanctions went into effect. The Iran sanctions have been officially cast. These are the most biting sanctions ever imposed, and in November they ratchet up yet again to another level. Anyone doing business in Iran will not be doing business with the United States. I'm asking for world peace, nothing less. Iran's port operators, energy and shipping and shipbuilding sectors are impacted. There are petroleum-related transactions, that's oil, and transaction by foreign financial institutions with the central bank of Iran is already having dramatic impact on this issue. And you're seeing a divide between the clerics right now, which is fascinating, between the clerics and the clerics. In other words, the ayatollahs who run everything, and then what I would call the clerics in the street, the ones that run the mosques, they are pointing their fingers at the clerics that are the ayatollahs saying, you are siphoning off the wealth of the Iranian people. And you've got the clerics, the ayatollahs saying to the politicians, this is your fault, even though we all know that the politicians are put in place by the ayatollahs. So you've got an inter-Iranian, inter-Persian, inter-religion conflict that's developed out of this, Jordan. And you say that's going to be very significant in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that you have to make sure, if you get to that level, I don't think we're there yet, but if you get to the point where you're talking about regime changing, you want to make sure that the regime is just letting more clerics empowered who took a different, or the same clerics empowered.
I don't think the people of Iran will allow that.
But I think the people of Iran are not, they're not weaponized. So they're not this, this is why we these countries like the United States, we have Second Amendments and things like that. I mean, that's the truth why it exists. Having these militias, if these issues come up, that is something covertly, that's a next step from the U.S. I mean, I think that would be huge. That's probably more likely than a direct military confrontation, is to make sure that there would be some access to be able to fight, because that's what there could be civil conflict, because you do have a people with a serious economic interest in at least maintaining the clerical control. You could overthrow the entire government, but they want to maintain the clerical control for economic reasons as well as religious. So you have to, when you start uniting together, I think they better remind themselves of what they happened to them more than 30 years ago when they started taking to the streets together and letting the clerics join the same protest as the secularist progressives. Yeah,
because that ended up becoming the Iranian Revolution, which is now trying to export around the world. So all of this has got to be in play. Fascinating discussions. I don't think we have time to grab one. Well, our producer's saying no. We'll grab, I'll tell you what, James, you're calling from New Mexico. We're going to grab you, your call as soon as we come back from the break. So we will do that. Let me say a couple things that I want to say at the outset here. I think that this is a unique opportunity to impact the geopolitical situation in the Middle East. Why? Because Iran is the largest exporter of state sponsor of terrorism. They are the ones that fund Hamas. They fund Hezbollah. They will find, even though they're Shia, they will fund the Sunni, which is Hamas. They don't care about that. I mean, ultimately they would care, be a clash within Islam. But as I said, you've got this inter-Iranian conflict going on right now where the head clerics, the ayatollahs, are blaming the politicians, who they appoint, by the way. They're not real elections there. You have what I would call street-level clerics. Those are the imams in the mosques saying that the ayatollahs are siphoning off the wealth of the people. So you've got this inter-religious conflict. You've got an political conflict going on, and simultaneously you have this. What does the Iranian Revolutionary Guard do when there is no money for them to be funded? We're taking a break. When we come back, we're going to take more of your calls. Developing situation in Iran. We are also in the middle of a matching challenge campaign at ACLJ.org. Any amount you donate to us, we get a matching gift for. You can do that at ACLJ.org or call us at 1-877-989-2255. That's ACLJ.org or 877-989-2255. Back with more in just a moment.
It is a critical time for our nation. and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
A lot going on the front on the Iranian sanctions front. We've got a lot of calls and comments on our social media platforms at Facebook and Periscope. So let's go right to the phones. I said we'd go to James first. Let's do that, Jordan.
Yep. James is calling in from New Mexico on line 1. James, welcome to Sekulow Live. You're on the air.
Hey, James.
Hi. I have a quick question and a comment.
Sure.
You had a previous caller who stated that he disagreed with the economic sanctions on Iran.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily disagree with those sanctions. But what we're talking about is how the people are affected and how previously leadership had not been affected by any efforts on the parts of our government. Is it possible if the people begin to suffer significantly in Iran that we could actually send some type of
humanitarian
economic aid or humanitarian aid or something like that?
James, it's a great question. Jason on Facebook asked the same thing. He said, is there any way to get humanitarian aid to the people while enforcing sanctions? Difficult, I will tell you. Part of the price of this is that that people are going to have to realize, and listen, I think the people of Iran are recognizing that they're going to go through a tough time here, and that's probably what causes things to change. Jordan?
Not like they were going through a great time before. For the most part, we had a small elite, and then the religious clerics and this Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So, remember, you get outside of Iran too. There's some major cities, a huge country, but there's also a lot of rural areas. You've got to be able to ratchet up pressure enough where it's just not people in Tehran and a few other coastal cities that are used to having shopping malls and food all over the stores. It's not Venezuela at this point. The shopping markets are still full. It's the inflation that's causing the issue. So I think the idea is, unfortunately, in these kind of situations, to build an opposition movement that is significant and people driven, not U.S. driven in the sense of we're not taking it's not all of military. But it's the people ultimately responding. It's maximum pressure means maximum pressure. So you've got to somehow have an effect where it's not just the billionaires being affected in Iran, but it's the farmer. So how does that happen? It's fully sanctioning every aspect of their economy in a country that wasn't used to it for a few years.
So I do understand the concern for humanitarian aid. I mean, we completely get this. That's why you hope this is short term. But Harry, what is the economic impact? This will have an economic impact on the. You've been studying this extensively. What happens here?
Well,
how does it come into play? In other words, what starts happening now?
Well, first, it's very important to remember that the United States government must clearly enforce the sanctions, despite the efforts by the European community leaders. Why is that important? Because when the sanctions bite, and they are biting already, this will place maximum pressure on Iranian leaders to either change or get out of the way. So one of the most important things that we can do is we can make sure that if the European community tries to offset U.S. sanctions, that we redouble our efforts to impose them directly on European firms so that they will get out of Iran voluntarily, even if they have to pay a price to their own governments, to the European community. I think it's very, very important to note this, that the European community seems more impressed by the clerics than the Iranian people. Yep. They seem to want to help them stay in power. It's difficult for me to understand why that is the case, but I think it clearly is.
Claudette is calling from Georgia, online 4. Claudette, welcome to Sekulow Live.
Hi, Claudette. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my
Sure.
call. You mentioned that Hassan Nadhakhani is now really imprisoned. I'm just trying to find out if he didn't get the idea, or maybe somebody should have counseled him to leave Iran, knowing that the sanctions were coming, because clearly it appears as though he's being used as a bargaining chip. Well,
he was arrested on July 22nd. Now, it was 5 years ago that we celebrated his victory due to our legal advocacy work and the work of other groups to secure his release. He doesn't want to leave Iran. He's Iranian. He's not. This is not the situation that we had with Saeed Abedini, who was an American, dual national in one sense, but was an American citizen. This is an Iranian citizen who wants to share his faith in his country of origin, Iran. Yeah, so you've worked on that case, Jordan.
Yeah, that's right. I do think that there may be links. He's had issues in between that time period, not as significant as this.
Yeah.
He went over to the UK, so he's been out. He traveled out. So if he wanted to stay out, any of those countries would have granted asylum to him and his family. But he didn't want to do that. So you have to respect those decisions of clients and people you represent. That being said, I think that they may be trying to play that. I think that they must not be paying great attention to how our government has been handling this, even with friends.
Right.
So look at the Andrew Brunson matter. Look at the North Korea issue. I mean, the sanctions are not. It's not like we pulled sanctions from North Korea to sit down with them. We increased the sanctions to sit down with them. We just kept even tightening up. So I think these are bad. This is the old playbook of Iranian leaders, likely, that is going to just, I think, for our president and for our government, the opposite of how the Obama administration would handle things, which is paying out and making concessions. This is the government who says, okay, in 2030 morning, we're going to take away your oil. And by the way, what happens next? It's a lot different under the Trump administration.
Go ahead, Wes.
Memory is a powerful thing, Jay. There's a whole generation of Iranians who remember what life was like before the religious mullahs took over. As oppressive as the Shah was at times, the mullahs, their rule is much more oppressive. Under the Shah of Iran, that generation of people, they remember what it's like to have financial prosperity, freedom to travel, education. Yep. They also, importantly, and this speaks to the caller, they remember what it was like before the theocracy to have freedom of religion. They also had a military that was trained and armed by the United States. All of this changed in 1979. There's a generation of Iranians, God bless them, who remember what life was like before.
Jonah in New York, line 2. Jonah, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live. You're on the air.
Hey, Jonah, go ahead.
Thank you. So this is like a chess game that's about to be a checkmate, and when it happens, It's going to happen brutally fast. You said a moment ago, Jay, that's your opinion that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Paint this more of a picture of what it looks like when it happens and how it happens. Is there a coup that gets put down brutally? Do the mullahs have an exit strategy? What does Iran start to look like after this works?
So here's what you have. That's a great question. Remember, it's going to be, number one, it's going to take millions of people on the streets of Iran. You saw that in 2009. Now, the mullahs and the regime, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, put that down, and nobody backed them, including the United States. Basically, we let that flounder. If you have world opinion supporting the Iranian people, things are going to change drastically. The other thing is you have what's right now developed, and I think this is what's so significant, Jonah, is you have an intercleric disagreement. You did not have that before. So you've got the Ayatollahs blaming the politicians, but the imams in the mosques blaming the Ayatollahs. And that is different than we've ever seen in this conflict before. And that is what Jordan can have. I mean, you're the one who said this. Really dramatic repercussions.
Yes, I think if you handle it correctly, and you've already got an eye on that these clerics are starting to move in with the same protesters who they would usually like to do away with and endorse getting rid of, but have realized that the economic issue is a concern because that's what causes people to revolt ultimately. And who becomes the target? Well, the guy leading the prayer in Tehran every Friday, which is a very high position because you're appointed directly by the Ayatollah. And he's older, but still radical. So, you don't want to forget that there will be those who try to save themselves by saying, oh, now I'm going to join this movement. And they pulled that in 1979. And who came out? The people who are armed. So that will become a next issue is how does that work covertly? And we've seen the issues with that. You don't want to go arming people that become ISIS, which I think, happened in Syria. So you didn't really know who the rebels were and which rebel groups became al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda, and which groups became ISIS. So you don't want to pull that. You've got to make sure the right people are empowered if it gets to that level. And that's still an if at this point. It still is a big if.
Yeah, so the big if here is whether the people on the streets are going to react, Harry, to this on these economic sanctions. But you think the economic sanctions will be, the impact of those will start being felt now?
Absolutely. And the impact will be felt by Iranian leaders. They will no longer have access, for instance, to their funds, to their monies that are held abroad. They will not be able to transfer funds back to Iran. And so this may lead to some internal infighting in Iran, which will lead ultimately to the collapse of the regime.
We have a lot more ahead on the situation in Iran. We're also going to play some excerpts from our movie, The Export. I'll give you some more information on this important topic.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
Welcome back. Lynn on Facebook said the leaders in Iran are liars. How can we negotiate with them? Well, you can. Because it's dependent on what's going to happen on the streets of Iran. That's going to tell us a lot. All right, we're taking your calls on a variety of topics, so we're getting a lot of calls on this Iran topic. That's for sure. Let's go ahead and go right back to the phones.
Yeah, Bill's calling in from Wyoming on line 3. Bill, welcome to Sekulow Live. You're on the air.
Hey, Bill, go ahead.
Good day to you, gentlemen.
Yep.
First of all, let me say real quick, I enjoy reading all the books that you've been putting out.
Oh, thank you.
Keep up the good work.
We'll do it.
Here's the way I look at it. If, and I'll emphasize if, Iran would have kept her word, okay, and used the uranium to develop power for the people,
Yep.
To supply power to the houses, homes, and all this. Use the money, put it into the economy, and stop funding terrorism. Would we be discussing this today? My answer would be no.
No, but they made the decision to take that money and to continue to be the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism globally. So that was the decisions the Ayatollahs made. But you do have this unique break right now that's going on intercleric with the imams in the mosques blaming the Ayatollahs and the Ayatollahs blaming the political leaders, and that leads to more unrest. So it's a very interesting and unusual framework, Wes, that we're seeing right now.
It really,
very unusual.
Yeah, very, very unusual. And it takes a lot of courage for an Iranian citizen to demonstrate. The secret police there is everywhere. Their prisons are full. Executions, summer executions are common. And so the people are to be admired, but it's going to take a lot more of them on the street to affect this change.
And probably get violent. I mean,
Yes.
you can't overthrow a government typically without a blood coup unless like the military changes sides.
Is there any chance of the Revolutionary Guard? What if they get?
Oh, I mean,
if the money
I think they
stops?
would love that, but then you're empowering the radical. You're empowering the guys that you don't want to have. To keep that nuclear issue. No, you've got to get rid of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. You have to get rid of the Ayatollah, or else it's not a real. That's a phony.
Between their regular military and the Revolutionary Guard is really, really.
What do the numbers look like, though?
The regular military is over 500,000 people. It's much larger than the Revolutionary Guard Corps, but they have the power. They answer directly to the Ayatollah.
But what if you had a conflict between? What if you did have a conflict between the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the regular Iranian military?
That would be a possibility of success, a real civil war, but the military, they might be able to pull it off.
Yeah. How much of the economy is impacted by that, Harry? I mean, is this all going on simultaneously?
Well, I would argue that at least 20 to 30% of their economy is driven by military adventurism. And in addition to that, Iran faces a huge corruption problem. So it's very, very possible that if you look at the funds that Iran received from the Iranian nuclear deal, perhaps more than 50 or 60% of those funds were misspent. And this has fueled unrest in the country, and justifiably so.
We've done a documentary on the issue of Iran and its export of terrorism. Take a look.
How significant is the conflict with radical Islam?
Radical Islam intends that all of us live under Sharia law. The enemy is radical Islam.
If Iran gets nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia will, Egypt will, Turkey, perhaps others.
The moment the Iranians have nuclear weapons, they have a nuclear umbrella over their international terrorist capability.
That is a formula for insecurity.
And I'm telling you, target number one is Israel. The Israelis cannot abide that. It is truly an existential threat.
These 40,000 rockets and missiles on the border with Lebanon could, be sprung and fired against Israel.
The more we have nuclear proliferation in the world, the more the risks are that there will be the availability of nuclear devices, the lethality of which is mind-boggling.
Is there a war going on with Iran right now?
This is the longest ongoing war in the Middle East. From almost day one, the Islamic Republic of Iran tried to obtain nuclear weapon and tried to export the revolution to proxy jihadist movement in the Middle East, trying to imitate the geniussy in the revolution of Khomeini to other places. And at the same time, the secret services of the United States and Israel declared war on Iran, and this is the clandestine war between these two forces.
Well, right now, Iran is the world's central banker to international terrorism.
If you want to see the entire movie, just go to ACLJfilms.com. That's ACLJfilms.com and look for the export. Let's go back to the phones.
Yeah, William in Georgia on line 5. William, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hey, William, you're on the air.
Hey, Jay. Hey, Jordan. Here's the big thing. For me, I totally agree with what President Trump is doing as far as like these sanctions with Iran, because it totally beats what the Obama administration had done for this leading from behind thing. But the main thing I wanted to get you guys to understand is that just as surely as the Bible says that pride comes before destruction and the Holy Spirit before a great fall, so the same thing is going to happen with President Rouhani, because his own people, I wouldn't be surprised would even come and do a mutiny against him.
Well, look, I mean, I think it's multi-directional. I think you're going to have the clerics. I think the Ayatollahs are going to blame the Rouhani. I think the people are going to blame the Ayatollahs and Rouhani, and I think the military is going to blame everybody. That's how I see it, Jordan.
Yeah, you're going to see now, and it's whether or not it comes to a head, whether or not. I mean, there's different ways this can turn out. You can get to a negotiating table. That may calm things down because maybe sanctions get some relief there if they take any measures. We will see now how, one, dedicated the religious leaders are in facing a different kind of U.S. government. We'll see that. We'll see the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, if they're going to put up with the monetary loss. Are they radical in the sense of being will? I mean, they've shown in the past they were. So we'll see. Now they've gotten much richer and much more used to these business side. So that's part two. Part three is, let's not forget they're in some military fishing expeditions right now in the region, and so it's not like they're all centralized back in Iran and that's all they got to worry about is domestic. They've got issues backing up Hezbollah with the Assad government, Hezbollah in Lebanon. In Yemen. I mean, you're taking on a lot of people when you're going to pick on the United States, the Saudis. I mean, these are serious militaries. I even think the Saudi military alone poses a more serious threat to Iran than they could combat, because they have our kind of technology.
Yep.
Our kind of weaponry.
Sherry on Facebook says, do we know where all the money went that the Obama administration gave them? Yes. Went to the Ayatollahs, and it went to Hamas and Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations. It increased their coffers for terrorism. That's what happened. All right, let's take the last caller here.
And they got stuck in Syria.
Yeah.
I mean, so that became drawn out, and billions of dollars goes away pretty quick when you're in a full-on a civil war to keep someone in power like the Assad government. Billy in California, line 1. Billy, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Billy. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, guys. Thanks for doing what you do. My question is really, how are these sanctions going to affect the operation of tech companies? And if not, why don't we target companies like Google, Microsoft, Foxconn, Broadcom?
Well, it's not us targeting, and it's the question of whether they're going to do business with Iran. Harry, how does that work?
Well, I think
that's part of it is on the technology. I mean, that's already in this phase, actually.
So I think the caller raises a very good question, because the tech companies have been notably complicit in basically helping despotic governments in China and probably Iran and Russia. So they would rather cave to those despotic governments than support free speech. And so one of the things that the United States should look into is how we can bring direct pressure on Google and Apple with respect to any transactions, A, with Iran, and B, make sure that the Iranian people have free access to information.
So here's what I also want to say. I mean, that's part of it. What you want to make sure is the Iranian people can utilize the technology, because that helps in the revolution. When I say the revolution, the internal revolution that's going to go on, the civil war conflict that might go on, the taking to the streets. That ability to communicate that way is essential.
I don't want to get into controversy surrounding Facebook and these podcasts that have happened, but let's be honest, they're no good, these companies right now. They're no good even here in the United States. So imagine what they're pulling to do business in these kind of countries like China. We know what they're doing. They monitor people for the government, and they censor those who they don't like politically.
So they're going to. I don't think. I trust that Facebook will not be censoring the resistance movement in Iran. I trust.
I don't know these days.
They don't. Hope they don't prove us wrong. That's going to do it for the broadcast today. Don't forget our matching challenge campaign at ACLJ.org. That's ACLJ.org. Also, you can call in your pledge on the number that's on the screen for you right now. So we encourage you to do either one of those as we continue to fight the good fight all over the world, even including Iran. We did a great movie on Iran. You saw a little bit of an excerpt from that in the broadcast today. That's important. That's a big part of what we do at the ACLJ in educating you. When we can bring you topics like the export, with Iran being the largest state sponsor of terrorism. We'll talk to you next week.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.